My father shouted, "You're just a taker, never giving this family a dime," so I cut off their allowance, deleted their 92 desperate voicemails, and auctioned off their precious mansion. The brick exploded through my penthouse window like a gunshot. Glass sprang across the marble floor of my Seattle living room. I froze, my heart slamming against my ribs, the champagne flute in my hand slipping to the ground, shattering into 1,000 glittering shards. The note tied to the brick unfurled in the dim glow of my chandelier, its scrawled words searing into my brain. "You've taken enough. Pay up or bleed." My breath caught, sharp and shallow, as I stumbled back, my heels crunching on broken glass. The city skyline glittered beyond the jagged hole in my window, indifferent to the chaos erupting in my carefully curated world. It was 2 a.m., the aftermath of the Christmas gala I'd thrown for my family. Richard, Diane, Chloe, and her leech of a husband, Jake. The marble countertops were still littered with caviar trays, half-empty champagne flutes, and crumpled napkins, evidence of a night I'd poured my heart and soul into, only to be met with their usual disdain. I, Eleanor Harper. Ellie to those who thought they knew me, senior partner at Caldwell & Pierce, the law firm that dominated Seattle's corporate scene, had orchestrated every detail of this evening. The string quartet, the imported truffles, the custom floral arrangements flown in from Paris. All for them. All to prove I was more than the parasite my father had called me in the voicemail that still burned in my ears. I fumbled for my phone, my hands trembling as I replayed his message for the third time that night. Richard's voice, cold and precise, sliced through the silence. "You're a parasite, Ellie. You've never earned this family's respect." Each word was a calculated wound, designed to cut deeper than the last. I'd heard it before, his accusations, his dismissals, but tonight, with the brick's threat still echoing in my mind, it felt like a death knell. My knees buckled, and I gripped the edge of the counter, the cool marble grounding me as my vision blurred. Then, a second crash. Another brick hurtled through the window, missing my head by inches and smashing the floor-to-ceiling mirror behind me. Shards rained down, catching the light like deadly confetti. I screamed, dropping my phone, my pulse roaring in my ears. The caterers, who'd been quietly stacking plates in the kitchen, froze. Their eyes darted to me, then away, as if I were a bomb about to detonate.
"Miss Harper, are you okay?"
One of them stammered. A young woman with wide eyes and a tray of dirty glasses clutched to her chest. I couldn't answer. My throat was too tight, my mind racing. Who sent the bricks? Why now? The note's words, "Pay up or bleed," looped in my head, tying themselves to Richard's voicemail, to the years of financial demands I'd met without question. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder, and I realized someone must have called the police. The caterers whispered among themselves, their discomfort palpable as they edged toward the service elevator, eager to escape the wreckage of my night. I forced myself to move, stepping over the glass to retrieve the note. My fingers shook as I smoothed it out, the paper damp from the December rain. The handwriting was jagged, unfamiliar, but the intent was clear. Someone wanted me to pay, and not just with money. My family's debts flashed through my mind. $100,000 0 cents. I'd loaned my parents in 2019, a formal agreement they'd never acknowledged, let alone repaid. The monthly transfers I'd set up like a fool. $5,000 0 cents to Richard, $3,000 0 cents to Chloe, $2,000 0 cents to Jake for his temporary housing that had dragged on for years. Had they hired someone to scare me? Or worse, had their reckless borrowing dragged me into a criminal underworld I didn't even know existed? The police arrived minutes later, their boots crunching on the glass as they surveyed the damage. A detective, a grizzled man named Hargrove with a notepad and a skeptical squint, took my statement. Any enemies, Miss Harper? Someone who might want to send a message? He asked, his pen hovering. I hesitated, my mind flashing to my family's faces earlier that night. Richard's cold indifference, Diane's sneering critique, Chloe's calculated charm, Jake's drunken demands. Enemies? I had a penthouse full of them just hours ago, but I shook my head, muttering something about disgruntled clients. Hargrove didn't buy it, but he didn't push. We'll look into it, he said, handing me his card. Get that window boarded up and stay somewhere safe tonight. Safe. The word felt like a cruel joke. There was no safe, not when the people I'd spent my life trying to please were the ones tearing me apart. I thought back to the gala, just 6 hours earlier, when I'd stood at the door of my penthouse, my burgundy silk gown catching the light, as I welcomed my family with a smile I'd rehearsed in the mirror. I'd wanted tonight to be different. A chance to bridge the chasm that had grown between us. Richard and Diane swept in first, their coats dusted with snow from the Seattle streets. Ellie, Diane said, her eyes raking over my art collection. Warhols and Basquiat's I'd spent years curating. This is all a bit pretentious, don't you think? Like you're trying too hard. Her words landed like a slap, but I swallowed the sting, guiding them to the bar. Richard didn't even look at me, his phone pressed to his ear as he barked orders about some shady real estate deal. Yes, close it by Monday or heads will roll, he snapped, brushing past me as if I were staff. I'd spent my career winning cases that reshaped corporate law, but to him, I was still the disappointing daughter who'd chosen a soft career over his empire of strip malls and foreclosures. Chloe arrived next, her blonde hair swept into a perfect chignon, her Chanel dress screaming money she didn't have. Ellie, you look stressed, she said, air-kissing my cheek. The firm keeping you up, or is it just life? Her smile was all teeth, a predator's grin, and I knew she was fishing for my next payout. Jake stumbled in behind her, reeking of bourbon, his tie askew. Ellie, my startup's this close to a breakthrough, he slurred, holding his fingers an inch apart. Just need a little cash to tide us over. You're good for it, right? I'd nodded, my stomach twisting, and busied myself with the caterers, checking the timing of the beef Wellington and the vintage of the Bordeaux. My family settled into my sunken living room, their laughter floating over the jazz quartet as they critiqued my lifestyle. The penthouse too sterile, the art too modern, the food too fussy. I moved between the kitchen and the dining room, a ghost in my own home, ensuring every detail was perfect while they drank my wine, and when we finally sat down to dinner, the table set with crystal and gold-rimmed china, Richard stood for a toast. I leaned forward, my heart flickering with hope. Maybe this time he'd see me. To family, he said, raising his glass. To loyalty. To those who show up when it counts. His eyes skipped over me, landing on Chloe, on Jake, on Diane. The others nodded, clinking glasses, as if they were the ones who'd bailed out the family business during the 2008 crash, who'd paid for Chloe's divorce attorney, who'd covered Jake's gambling debts. Diane leaned toward Chloe, her voice loud enough for me to hear. The lobster's overcooked. Ellie should have hired better help. I gripped my fork, my knuckles white and forced a smile. Later, as the dessert plates were cleared, chocolate torte with gold leaf, another expense I'd justified for their approval. Chloe pulled me aside. Ellie, the boys need private school tuition, she said, her voice syrupy. It's $50,000 0 cents a year, and with Jake's startup, you know how it is. You'll help, right? Her eyes glittered with expectation, as if my bank account were her personal ATM. I mumbled something non-committal, my mind flashing to the $100,000 0 cents I'd loaned my parents in 2019. A lifeline for their failing real estate ventures. I'd had my lawyer, Marcus, draw up a contract, but they'd never mentioned it since, as if the money had evaporated into thin air. The Montana cabin came to mind next, a sprawling retreat I'd bought 3 years ago, hoping it would be a place for us to reconnect. 5 bedrooms, a wraparound deck, views of snow-capped peaks. They'd used it constantly. Chloe's ski weekends, Richard's business retreats, Jake's drunken benders. But not once had they thanked me. Not once had they invited me. I was the bank, not the guest. Standing in my kitchen now, the caterers gone and the police lights flashing outside, I unlocked my phone and opened my banking app. The recurring transfers stared back at me, a digital confession of my weakness. $5,000, 0 cents monthly to Richard. $3,000, 0 cents to Chloe. $2,000, 0 cents to Jake. My father's voice echoed again. "You're a parasite, Ellie." A tear slid down my cheek, hot and bitter, but it wasn't sadness, it was rage. My finger hovered over the first transfer, then pressed cancel, then the next, and the next. With each tap, my breath came easier, as if I were shedding chains I hadn't known I was wearing. The police left around 3 a.m., promising to patrol the area, but I couldn't stay in the penthouse, not with the broken windows, the threatening note, the ghosts of my family's betrayal. I grabbed my leather weekender, stuffed it with essentials, laptop, charger, a change of clothes, and headed for the garage. My phone buzzed relentlessly, 35 missed calls and 60 texts piling up from Richard, Chloe, Diane, even Jake. I ignored them, but one message from Chloe caught my eye. "You can't just cut us off, Ellie. I'll sue you for everything you've got." My blood ran cold. Sue me? For what? For finally saying no? I started my car, a sleek black Audi, and pulled out onto the rain-slick streets of Seattle, my heart pounding as I headed for the one place I could think to go, the Montana cabin. But trouble followed me. Halfway down a steep hill in Capitol Hill, my brakes failed. The pedals sank to the floor, useless, as the car gained speed, careening toward a busy intersection. My pulse spiked, my hands white-knuckling the steering wheel as I swerved to avoid a delivery truck. Horns blared, headlights flashed, and I yanked the emergency brake, the car screeching to a stop inches from a concrete barrier. My chest heaved, sweat beading on my forehead. This wasn't an accident. Someone had tampered with my car. The stalker? My family? Or someone they'd dragged into their mess? I called 911, my voice shaking as I reported the incident. The police towed my car, and a detective, Hargrove again, met me at the scene. "Brake lines were cut clean," he said, his eyes narrowing. "This is personal, Miss Harper. You need to tell me who's got it out for you." I rented a car and drove through the night, the Montana cabin my only refuge. The roads were icy, the darkness swallowing the landscape as I crossed into Idaho. My phone kept buzzing, but I didn't look. I couldn't. Not when Chloe was threatening lawsuits, Richard was demanding I fix this, and Diane was claiming a heart attack I knew was a lie. At 4 a.m., I turned my phone to airplane mode, the silence washing over me like a baptism. For the first time in years, I felt free. But freedom, I'd soon learn, came with a price. When I reached the cabin, nestled in a dense forest near Flathead Lake, I expected peace. Instead, I found chaos. The front door was ajar, the windows smashed, and another note pinned to the wall. "You can't hide." My stomach dropped. Someone had been here, recently. I grabbed a fireplace poker, my hands trembling as I searched the house, every creak of the floorboard sending my heart into my throat. The cabin was empty, but the violation lingered, a reminder that my family's poison had followed me even here. I called Marcus, my lawyer, waking him at 5 a.m. "Ellie, what the hell's going on?" he asked, his voice groggy but sharp. I told him everything, the bricks, the brakes, the break-in. "Get a security system installed," he said, "and don't tell anyone where you are. not even me. I spent the next day barricaded in the cabin, my laptop open as I drafted a legal memo for a pro bono case I'd taken on, a women's shelter fighting a corporate takeover. The work grounded me, pulling me back to the lawyer I'd been before my family's demands consumed me. I sketched strategies on a notepad, my pen moving with a freedom I hadn't felt in years. Outside, the Montana snow fell softly, blanketing the forest in silence, but the peace was fleeting. My phone, still in airplane mode, sat on the counter like a ticking bomb. I knew what waited when I turned it back on. Chloe's threats, Richard's rage, Diane's manipulations. And the stalker, whoever they were, was still out there, watching, waiting. That night, I hiked a trail near the cabin, needing to clear my head. The forest was dark, the air sharp with pine and frost. I'd gone a mile when I heard it, footsteps crunching behind me. My heart stopped. I turned, my flashlight beam cutting through the trees, but no one was there. Then, a glint of metal. A figure masked and armed lunged from the shadows, a knife flashing in their hand. I screamed, bolting down the trail, branches tearing at my coat as I ran. My lungs burned, my legs pumping as I dodged roots and rocks, the figure's footsteps pounding behind me. I reached the cabin, slamming the door and locking it, just as a thud hit the frame. I sank to the floor, sobbing, the poker clutched to my chest. The stalker was real, and they weren't just sending messages anymore. By morning, I was a wreck, but I refused to break. I called Marcus again, demanding he hire a private investigator to trace the stalker. "Ellie, this is bigger than your family," he warned. "The deaths you've been covering, there's talk of organized crime ties. Richard's been borrowing from some bad people." My blood ran cold. Organized crime? Was that why the bricks, the brakes, the knife? Had my family's greed pulled me into a world of mobsters and hitmen? I didn't know, but I knew one thing. I was done being their pawn. And back in Seattle, my firm was imploding. A colleague, Vanessa, had leaked my family drama to the board, painting me as unstable. Chloe, I learned, had fed her the story, hoping to sabotage my partnership. The board called an emergency meeting, demanding I address the rumors or step down. My career, the one thing I'd built without my family's help, was slipping through my fingers. I stared at the cabin's pine walls, my sketches scattered across the table, and made a choice. I wasn't running anymore. I'd fight. For my name, my career, my life. But first, I needed answers. Who was the stalker? What did my family owe, and how far were they willing to go to keep me in their grip? As I packed to return to Seattle, my phone buzzed with a new voicemail. It was Jake, his voice slurred but menacing. "Ellie, you think you can cut me off? I know people who'll make you regret this." I deleted the message, my hand steady for the first time in days. Let them come, I thought. I was Eleanor Harper, and I was done paying for their sins. The silence was intoxicating, a rare kind of freedom that wrapped around me like the Montana snow as I drove through Idaho's icy roads. My phone, now in airplane mode, lay dormant in the passenger seat of the rented SUV, its screen dark, its notifications silenced. For the first time in years, I wasn't tethered to the demands of my family, Richard's venomous voicemails, Chloe's manipulative texts, Diane's crocodile tears, or Jake's drunken threat. I, Eleanor Harper, senior partner at Caldwell and Pierce, was untethered, a woman reborn in the pre-dawn chill of a world that didn't yet know my name. But freedom, I was learning, was a fragile thing, and the shadows of my past were already clawing their way back. I arrived at the Montana cabin just as the sky bruised purple, the forest around Flathead Lake looming like a fortress of secrets. The tires crunched on the gravel drive, and I killed the engine, my breath fogging in the frigid air. The cabin was supposed to be my sanctuary, a 5-bedroom retreat I'd bought to stitch my fractured family together. Instead, it had become their playground, a place for Chloe's ski parties and Richard's shady business retreats, all funded by my bank account, all without a single thank you. I grabbed my weekender bag and the fireplace poker I'd kept close since Seattle, my nerves still raw from the brick through my penthouse window, the cut brake lines, the note that read, "Pay up or bleed." As I approached the front door, my heart stopped. The lock was broken, the door ajar, and the windows, those floor-to-ceiling panes I'd chosen for their view of the mountains, were smashed, jagged glass glinting in the moonlight. Pinned to the wall inside was another note, scrawled in the same jagged handwriting. "You can't hide." My pulse roared in my ears, the poker trembling in my grip as I stepped inside, glass crunching under my boots. The air was heavy with the scent of pine and something sharper. Gasoline? I scanned the shadows, every creak of the floorboards a potential threat. The living room was trashed, cushions slashed, books torn, the stone fireplace smeared with what looked like blood but was probably paint. Someone had been here, and they wanted me to know it. I checked every room, my flashlight beam slicing through the darkness, but the cabin was empty. Still, the violation clung to me, a second skin I couldn't shed. I barricaded the door with a chair and called Marcus, my lawyer, his voice groggy but steady at 5 a.m. "Ellie, this is bad," he said when I described the break-in. "I'm sending a security team, but you need to leave. Now." I refused. This cabin was mine, bought with my sweat, my sacrifices. I wasn't running again. By morning, I'd boarded up the windows with plywood from the shed, my hands blistered, but my resolve ironclad. I set up my laptop on the dining table, the one piece of furniture still intact, and dove into a pro bono case for a women's shelter in Seattle, a cause that felt like a lifeline. My fingers flew across the keys, drafting a legal defense to block a corporate takeover of their property. The work was pure, untainted by the family demands that had suffocated me for years. I sketched strategies on a notepad, my pen moving with a clarity I hadn't felt since law school, when I dreamed of changing the world instead of bankrolling my family's greed. Outside, the snow fell heavier, blanketing the forest in a silence that mirrored the one I'd chosen when I'd turned off my phone. But silence, like freedom, was a lie. The first voicemail came when I finally turned airplane mode off, unable to resist the pull of my family's chaos. My phone convulsed with notifications, 45 missed calls, 72 texts, a digital tantrum from the people who'd never seen me as anything but a checkbook. Chloe's voice was shrill, panicked. "My car was repossessed today, Ellie, in front of my son's school. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was?" Jake's was slurred, barely coherent. "Landlord's kicking me out. You gotta fix this, sis." Diane's was the worst, her voice trembling with rehearsed fragility. "I had a heart attack last night, Eleanor. Your fault." I deleted them all, my hands steady, but the lies gnawed at me. Marcus had already confirmed Diane was fine. Her heart attack just another manipulation to guilt me back into line. But the escalation was real, and it wasn't just personal. A tabloid headline had hit the internet that morning, orchestrated by Richard. "Top Seattle lawyer abandons family in financial ruin." The article painted me as a heartless heiress, hoarding wealth while my family starved. My firm's board was in an uproar. Vanessa's betrayal fed by Chloe's leaks, threatening my partnership. I was losing everything I'd built, and the stalker was still out there, their motives a question mark that kept me awake. I needed to move, to shake off the weight of their lies. I laced up my hiking boots and hit a rugged trail near the cabin, the forest dense with pine and shadow. The air was sharp, my muscles aching as I climbed higher, the vastness of Montana swallowing my thoughts. For a moment I felt clarity, a sense of who I could be without their chains. Then I heard it. Footsteps, deliberate and close. My heart lurched. I spun around, my flashlight beam catching nothing but trees. "Who's there?" I called, my voice swallowed by the wind. Silence. Then, a crack of branches, and a figure burst from the shadows, masked, their knife glinting as they charged. I screamed, adrenaline flooding my veins as I sprinted down the trail, branches tearing at my jacket. The figure was fast, their footsteps pounding behind me. Closer, closer. I stumbled, my ankle twisting, but I scrambled up, dodging roots and rocks until I reached the cabin, slamming the door and locking it. A thud hit the frame, then another, the knife scraping against the wood. I sank to the floor, sobbing, the poker clutched to my chest, my mind racing. Who was this? A hired thug? A family member gone rogue? Or someone tied to the organized crime Marcus had warned about, the debts Richard had racked up with dangerous people? I called Marcus again, my voice shaking. "They tried to kill me," I said, describing the attack. He was silent for a moment, then, "Ellie, I'm digging into Richard's finances. There's a paper trail. Loans, offshore accounts, names we don't recognize. This isn't just about your family anymore." My stomach dropped. Offshore accounts? Was Richard laundering money? Had my $100,000 0-cent loan been funneled into something illegal? The questions piled up, each one a hook in my mind, pulling me deeper into a mystery I wasn't sure I could survive. Marcus promised to send a private investigator to the cabin, but he urged me to return to Seattle. "The firm's giving you an ultimatum," he said. "Address the tabloid scandal or lose your partnership. You can't hide forever." I wasn't hiding. I was fighting, just not on their terms. I spent the next day transforming the cabin, booking it for women's legal workshops I'd run myself, a space for others to reclaim their power as I was trying to reclaim mine. The idea felt right, a way to turn this place of betrayal into a beacon of hope. But the world outside was closing in. My phone buzzed with a call from Sophie, my cousin in Sydney, her Australian accent warm and fierce. "Ellie, I saw the tabloid crap," she said. "Richard's telling everyone you've lost it, that you're having a breakdown. He's lying, and I'm here for you. You're not the villain they paint." Her words were a lifeline, a reminder that someone saw me, but they also underscored the smear campaign Richard was waging. My professional network was fraying, colleagues I'd trusted now whispering about my instability. I drove back to Seattle 2 days later, the cabin secured with new locks and a security system Marcus had arranged. The road was a blur of snow and asphalt, my mind churning with questions. Who was the stalker? What did Richard owe and to whom? And why, after all I'd given, did my family hate me so much? I arrived at my firm's downtown office at noon, my suit crisp, my face composed, but inside I was a storm. The board meeting was in an hour, my chance to save my partnership, but trouble found me first. Jake was waiting in the lobby, his eyes bloodshot, a knife glinting in his hand as he lunged toward me. "You ruined me, Ellie!" he shouted, his voice echoing off the marble walls. Security tackled him before he reached me, the blade clattering to the floor, but the fear lingered, a cold weight in my chest. He was dragged away, screaming about my betrayal, and I stood there, my colleagues staring, the tabloid headline now a living nightmare. The board meeting was brutal. Vanessa, smirking from her seat, presented the article as evidence of my unreliability. I countered with facts, my win rate, my billable hours, the landmark case I'd just closed, a $500 million 0-cents merger that had cemented our firm's reputation. The board wavered, but their ultimatum was clear: fix the scandal or step down. I left the room, my head high but my future hanging by a thread. That night, Marcus called with worse news. "Your family's suing you," he said. "They claim the Montana cabin was a family trust, not your personal property. They're after millions." I laughed, a bitter sound. "A trust? The cabin was in my name, paid for with my money, but the audacity didn't surprise me. What did was Marcus's next revelation. The $100,000 0 cents loan you gave Richard? There's a second contract, Ellie. Your signature's on it. But it's not your handwriting. He might have forged it to dodge repayment. My world tilted. Forgery? Had Richard planned this all along? Using my money to fund his schemes while setting me up to take the fall? The questions burned, each one a spark in the tinder of my anger. I went to my penthouse, the windows now repaired, but the scars of that night still fresh. Chloe was there, uninvited, her son at her side, his eyes wide with confusion. "We're broke, Ellie," she said, tears streaming down her face. "My boy's school won't take him back. Help us, please." Her son hugged her leg, and for a moment I wavered, the old guilt rising like bile. But I saw her game, the same manipulation she'd used for years. "Talk to my lawyer," I said, my voice cold, and shut the door. Her sobs echoed in the hall, but I felt nothing. I was done being their savior. The next morning, Diane's email arrived. "I had a stroke, Eleanor. Your fault. Come home." Marcus checked the hospital records. Another lie, as expected. But the lies were piling up, and so were the threats. At the firm, I threw myself into my pro bono case, winning a restraining order for the women's shelter, a small victory that reminded me who I was. But the real battle was coming. Richard had organized a public protest at the auction of their Bellevue mansion, a sprawling estate I'd bailed out twice with my own money. I arrived at the auction, my silk blouse understated, my resolve ablaze. The street was chaos. Reporters, neighbors, my family front and center, holding signs that read, "Justice for the Harpers." Richard stepped forward, his face a mask of righteous fury. "You're destroying us, Eleanor," he said, cameras flashing. "We gave you everything, and this is how you repay us?" I pulled out a printed transcript of his voicemail, my hands steady as I read aloud. "You're a parasite, Ellie. You've never earned this family's respect." The crowd gasped, the reporters scribbling furiously. "You took my money, my trust, my life," I said, my voice clear, unwavering. "I'm taking it back." Chloe rushed to Diane, who was fake crying for the cameras, while Jake shouted obscenities from the sidelines. The auctioneer, unfazed, began the bidding, and the mansion, symbol of their greed, sold to a tech mogul for $12 million, 0 cents. I walked away, the weight of their betrayal lifting with each step. But the stalker wasn't done. A week later, in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where I'd bought a minimalist ranch house to start over, a photo arrived in my mailbox. No envelope, just a Polaroid of my new home, taken from across the street. On the back, in that same jagged handwriting, "I'm still here." My blood ran cold. They'd followed me, 800 miles from Seattle, into a life I was building from scratch. I called Marcus, who was already unraveling Richard's financial web. "Your parents are in a cramped apartment now," he said. "Jake's working construction." "Chloe sent an email." "I was wrong, sorry." "Want me to respond?" I shook my head, archiving the message. Her apology was too late, too hollow. But was it genuine, or another ploy? The question lingered, a shadow in my new light. I transformed the Montana cabin into a legal retreat for women escaping toxic families, a place of healing and empowerment. I mentored Mia, a young lawyer whose parents mocked her dreams, her story echoing mine. "They'll never see you if you keep giving," I told her, my voice soft but sure. "Love isn't earned through sacrifice." She nodded, her eyes bright with hope, and I felt a surge of purpose. My Santa Fe home, with its terracotta tiles and open skies, was a canvas for my new life, filled with pro bono work and chosen family. Sophie, Marcus, Mia, But the stalker's endgame loomed, a question I couldn't answer. Were they tied to Richard's crimes, to Chloe's desperation, or something darker waiting to strike? A year later, I stood on my Santa Fe porch, the Sangre Cristo Mountains glowing amber in the sunrise. My phone was silent, my heart steady. The retreat thrived, women finding strength in the space I'd reclaimed. My family's influence was a fading shadow, their lies no match for the truth I'd built. I'd faced bricks, knives, lawsuits, and betrayal, but I was still here, unbroken, unstoppable. The stalker was still out there, their motives a mystery. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I was Eleanor Harper, and this was my story, mine to write, mine to live.